Alright, so this is going to be part 15 to what if Tanjiro learned the breath of the moon. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness, 'cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness, that I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so in the last part we had just gotten done with Muzan going to Kaguya's home, and there Kaguya sacrificing himself to try to kill Muzan. Now, this shocked and scared Muzan quite a bit for a few reasons. Now, he knew that he hated him, but he never knew to the extent. And for him to sacrifice not only himself but his family as well, this scares Muzan because he felt no killing intent from him, yet he hated him so much. There's only been a few times in where Muzan has been truly scared by a person, and this is one of the times. Continuing off of that, he tries to regenerate from, well, the burns and the explosion itself, which he does successfully with no problem at all. This is where he sees flesh seeds appear out of nowhere. Then they grow and pin him down, piercing him throughout his body. It's then revealed that Tomio was the one who did it. She then tries to inject Muzan with something, but her hand gets engulfed by his flesh, rendering her immobile. As this is happening, she then smiles as she says that she has learned how to cure demons, and in her hand is that very same cure. Now, Muzan is not affected by this. He then looks at her and starts to slowly try to crush her skull, poking her eye out. He says that her anger towards him doesn't really make sense. He's not the one that killed her family, it was her. Not only that, but she also killed many other humans in her time. Now, she says that it's his fault for turning her into a demon, as she only wanted to live from a disease that she had, not to go around killing people. As this is happening, and they're having this back and forth, this is when the stone pillar, Goimei, actually comes in and actually smashes Muzan's head. Muzan is not affected by this at all, and the stone pillar is not surprised at all. Kaguya had told him that this wouldn't work, as he could survive getting his head cut off. This is where Muzan retaliates by using these thorns to try to attack the stone pillar. But the stone pillar, having a similar weapon, defends himself quite well. As the two are going back and forth, the other demon slayers come through, and Goimei tells everyone that Muzan cannot die via cutting his head off. This is when the gravity of the situation really hits everyone. Seeing the person who created demons in this world actually shakes them all, except for Tanjiro. Tanjiro and a few others are just angry because of what he had done to them. Now, they all surround Muzan, and as this is happening, the floor beneath him changes to that of a building's wall. And Muzan says something right before they fall into this building. He says, "You honestly think you could surround me? Pathetic. You will be going to hell now." And just as he said that, the floor opens and everyone falls through, going to different parts of the building. Tanjiro ends up being with Giyu, and there they fight off some fodder demons, showing the progress that Tanjiro has gone through as well as Giyu. So the pair continues going through the building, trying to find more demons to slay, and trying to find Muzan in particular. Here, this is where they hear a crow. This crow says that Shinobu has died in her fight. She was absorbed by Doma, the second upper moon. After hearing this, Tanjiro reevaluates the situation, stops, then puts on his gear. He puts on the glasses that he got from the swordsmith village, as well as tying his hair back, not letting it get in the way of his fighting. With all this preparation done, he gives a pair to Giyu, just in case he needs it, as he's going to be using his new style, that being the Breath of the Eclipse. With this new look, Tanjiro looks like a younger version of the Breath of the Sun user. After all that transpires, Tanjiro and Giyu continue on to try to find Muzan. Here they meet with a familiar face, that being Akaza, the third upper moon. The first thing Akaza says to them is, "Have I seen you before?" looking at Tanjiro, not realizing that it was the kid from before. Because if you remember, At this point, Tanjiro should be around the age of 17, given the fact that it's like near the end of the manga, and that's when he becomes 17, so it should be at least around a year since he would have killed Rengoku in the original canon. Tanjiro lowers his glasses, revealing more of his face. Here, Akaza remembers who he was, the kid who ruined the final showdown between him and Rengoku, otherwise known as Kojiro. With that, Akaza continues what he was saying. You have a new look to you. I hope you could be a good fight, since you kinda owe me one. And this is where he throws the first punch, trying to instantly kill Tanjiro. Here, Tanjiro just slices it with a normal slice, doesn't even use a form. This is where Akaza notices that he has definitely gotten stronger. Akaza says, "So, you reached the level of a pillar. I guess Rengoku was right. Nevertheless, you're not going to win. You're merely human, fragile, with limits. But tell me something before you die. Where is Rengoku? Surely he's in despair after losing an arm." Tanjiro takes in a deep breath, then exhales after a few moments. This is where he remembers a memory that he had with his father. Here he remembers that his father had once had to kill a bear that was known for killing and eating people. In this memory, he slices off the bear's head with no killing intent. Easily, I might add. Now Tanjiro knows that his father isn't someone who just boasts about his power. He was trying to teach Tanjiro something, how to mask his presence, because his father to him was almost like a plant. There was no spirit to him. He was always gentle and kind, yet never showed any frustration, anger, or sadness. With this, Tanjiro goes for a blow to Akaza. He uses the first form of Breath of the Moon. Akaza, seeing this style and this amount of force put into it, kinda scares him a bit, knowing that he has the same style as the first Upper Moon. He decides to counter it with his leg, since his leg is a lot stronger than his arms. Given this, he's able to redirect the attack. He says to Tanjiro, "Why don't you become a demon? Your life will come to an end, whether it's by my hands or his hands. Think about it, Tanjiro. You can be the strongest demon. I know you can." Tanjiro is trying to be silent, not giving him the time of day, but he slowly starts to get angrier, and he tries to keep this down, and eventually Giyu actually joins the fight, seeing that Tanjiro is struggling a bit. The three go back and forth with no ground really being lost until Akaza uses one of his techniques called Disorder. So essentially the technique is Akaza punching in front of himself. This creates a barrage of chaotic range shockwaves. And remember, this was enough to basically overwhelm Kojiro in the actual fight during the train arc. Now this knocks back Giyu through a few walls, and Tanjiro is able to, well, maneuver through it. Now Tanjiro uses his first form of Breath of the Eclipse. Now I don't think I named it yet, so I'm going to be calling it Spark of Light, as what it essentially does is slides the two swords together, creating a spark that becomes a projectile that's launched at someone. So this hits Akaza, and Akaza's chest basically explodes, like the hole in it is just huge. And then this is where Giyu recovers and tries to cut off his head. In retaliation, this is where Akaza gets mad, seeing that he might lose to humans. Using his compass needle, he's able to counter Giyu's attack, then turn to Tanjiro, who's trying to do the same thing. This is where he uses another technique, that being his annihilation type. Now this was a very, very powerful technique, as he was able to go through Kojiro's most powerful technique during the train arc. Now typically with this technique, he has to lunge forward and then punch, and this creates like a shockwave, and in this scenario he has no time or room to leap forward, so it's not going to be as powerful, but it is going to be basically point blank. Here Tanjiro does another form of the Breath of the Eclipse, the second form, that being Umbra. Now the Umbra is the Eclipse shadow, so I'll put up a picture to show what it is visually, but yeah, I'm just trying to keep with the themes of Eclipse, so understand that. So the basic premise of this attack is that it is a thrust move, but essentially the thrust is hidden within the shadow, and the outside of it, the ring if you will, is super bright, but within it is the thrust attack, which is hidden. In this split moment, not only does Tanjiro unlock his demon mark again, but he also sees through the transparent world. Now this technique allows you to basically see through people, their muscles, their skeletal joints, and organs. This also gives him the ability to foresee an opponent's attack and analyze it by the following which I just said. Because of this, and the fact that Akaza couldn't leap forward while doing his attack like he normally does, Tanjiro was able to sidestep it and just pierce his skull, basically exploding his head off. The anger and frustration gets to Akaza and he refuses to die. His head starts to slowly regenerate, and in this meantime, Tanjiro unleashes the 14th form of the Breath of the Moon, this being called Catastrophe Tenmen Crescent Moon. So the description goes as follows. It creates a powerful chaotic vortex with long-range omnidirectional slashes that destroy anything that comes within its radius, and the closest thing being Akaza. With his body being completely shredded, he wouldn't have a chance to regenerate from this, as just there isn't enough of anything left. At the same time as this happening, his will would be basically shattered, and he would want to move on to the afterlife because of the spirits of his family from the past would come in to basically tell him to stop. Just like how you see it with almost every other demon in Demon Slayer. And with this, they beat Akaza. The crows would have told the rest of the people within the castle that Tanjiro and Giyu have defeated the third upper moon. Now, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but if you guys are wondering where's Kojiro at, he's basically securing the perimeter of Kaguya's family at this point with the sound pillar with him. So what I mean by that is the son of Kaguya is the one controlling the crows, and both him and the sound pillar are basically protecting them because they're the only way that communication can travel between all the different demon slayers within the castle. With the fight over, Tanjiro and Giyu basically take a small rest as they want to recover a bit of their stamina, and after that, this is where they see a wall crash beside them, this being the first upper moon, the originator of the Breath of the Moon. That being, and I know I might be getting this wrong, it's a kind of a hard name to pronounce, being Kokushibo. Now that is his demon name, so keep that in mind. His human name being Michikatsu Tsukikuni. Hopefully I've said that right, but I apologize if I didn't. Getting back to the story, this is where Kokushibo would look at Tanjiro and he would see the spitting image of his brother, and he would say his name, a name that he hasn't said in centuries, Yorichi. He would say this out loud, just being awestruck at what he's looking at. Tanjiro at this point looks exactly like Yorichio. He has his hair tied back, and he also has his earrings that Yorichi had when he was still alive. Tanjiro seeing him would also freak out a bit, knowing that this is the man who has cursed their own bloodline, that being his masters. After a small moment of silence that was super tense, Kokushibo continued talking to Tanjiro. We share not even a single drop. No cell of mine lives within you, yet you are able to use my breath, and you look like him. Who are you, Tanjiro? Tanjiro kept silent as the demon in front of him continued to talk. You know, a few weeks before this started, I had talked to your sensei. In his final moments, we had a conversation. A man that was dying had no reason to fear me, and he had no doubt that you would be the one to finish me. So I asked him, what makes you so sure that this boy can end my life? I who gave up everything to become stronger. And on top of that, you are using a style that you only know because my descendants copied from me, and you have the audacity to challenge the creator. No one in my bloodline has been able to perfect my style. Yet, this man, this withering man, had so much confidence within you. I asked him again, what makes you so special? He replied with a simple answer. He told me that you were like the sun, that you shined ever so brightly, even within the darkest times. He told me that fate had caught up to me, that you were born with one single purpose, to stop me. Looking at you now, that might be right. You look like a man I once knew, I once hated, but I am someone who does not abide by fate. I have given up too much, fought for too long for it to end here. I will defy fate yet again. Tanjiro would quickly tell Giyu that this demon is the highest rank in the upper moons, the first upper moon. Kokushibo would use the first form of the breath of the moon. Tanjiro would counter this with the third form of the breath of the moon. Seeing how much skill Tanjiro has, Kokushibo would step it up a notch. It would use the seventh form of the breath of the moon, this being Mirror of Misfortune Moonlit. Tanjiro would sidestep this in between the slashes, and in the remaining slashes that would go towards Giyu, Giyu would use Dead Calm, which is the 11th form of the breath of water. But it isn't good enough. Both Tanjiro and Giyu would be cut, slices being across both bodies. Keep in mind that in original canon, Kokushibo needed 3 pillars to fight him, plus Genya, and he almost won. He is on a completely different level from any of them. Tanjiro, now being on the offensive, would try to use the 8th form of the breath of the moon, that being Moon Dragon Ringtail. So this is the giant slash that you could see. Kokushibo is amazed that Tanjiro could learn such a difficult technique, but he remembers that this person that he's going against has mastered his style. So when he tries to block it, he actually does successfully block most of it, but the chaotic blades that stem off of the ability are what slice him up. But it's not like he's totally shredded or anything, but this does end up cutting his arm, making it harder for him to use his sword. Now, obviously, he would regenerate within a few moments, but this is where Giyu would come in and use the 4th form of Breath of Water, that being Striking Tides. Now, this is a form that I believe Tanjiro used within the first couple episodes. Now, what it is that the user uses consecutive slashes while twisting their body and sword in the flow, similar to water, but this basically delivers like a bunch of like slashes towards the enemy. But because of the angle that it was, he ends up missing the head, given that there wasn't really much time to react to this. Seeing him on the ground, this is where Giyu would try to use the 7th form, that being Drop Ripple Thrust, in hopes of piercing the head of the upper moon. But this is when Kokushibo actually uses his blood arts. This creates a bunch of katana blades coming out of his body, at least what's left. This pierces Giyu in the shoulder, making him stop his attack. After this, Kokushibo stands up, all regenerated, with a bunch of katana blades coming out of his body. He then tries to go for a slash at Giyu, but this is where Tanjiro actually defends him using Raging Sun, that being one of the forms of the Dance of the Fire God. Now, if you've been with this series for a long time, you know that Dance of the Fire God is really just the Breath of the Sun, but at this time, Tanjiro doesn't know that, so he calls it the Dance of the Fire God, because that's the only name he knows. But just for a description of the attack, Essentially, Raging Sun uses 2 horizontal slashes that are used to either attack or defend. So as this is happening, Kokushibo is just looking at Tanjiro dead in the eye, and he sees that he has awakened his eye again. After this, Tanjiro jumps back, and what is revealed is Giyu also with his mark unlocked or awakened. This is where he uses the 6th form, that being Whirlpool. Now, it's exactly what it sounds like. It basically creates this kind of whirlpool of air that cuts anything that's within it. This causes Kokushibo to be kind of shredded around him, just like he was before. And the blades that were connected to him also get sliced up and scattered around the area. At the same time as this happening, someone is observing the fight, this being Genya. So this makes Kokushibo incredibly angry, because Tanjiro defended with a Breath of the Sun attack, which he could never learn in his life, and he still hasn't learned it. Not only that, but he knows that this kid is just what he hates the most, and that is the embodiment of his brother. He tries to regenerate from this attack, and then this is where Tanjiro uses one of the forms of the Breath of the Eclipse, that being Umbra. But this is also going to be combined with another form, that being Penumbra. Now, this is the kind of less darker outer area of the shadow that's cast by the moon and earth. I'll show a picture for it, but basically the shadow itself is called the Umbra, and the outside of it that's still kind of dark is called the Penumbra. So how this attack looks like is the thrust, that is the Umbra part, is still casted within shadow, but the pre-Umbra part is going to be this light or kind of less dark kind of spiral slice that's going forward as he's thrusting. So almost like a cookie cutter, I guess. So this gets stabbed into the chest of Kokushibo, and this basically blows it up. Like he has no chest anymore. This gets him to the point where he's just downright furious. Everything that he's worked for is about to be taken from him. But not only that, by someone who reminds him so much of his brother, that not only mastered his own creation, that being Breath of the Moon, but also learned his brother's techniques. And not only that, but on top of all this, he combined the two. And this is what pushes him over the edge. He starts to mutate. He starts to become a monster. He starts to become something that he's not himself. He could see his reflection within the swords that they have, but he doesn't care as much as he did in canon. Everything is almost blinded by rage at this point. He starts attacking them with his tendril-like features, which actually does get some hits on them, as it is super powerful, and it is an attack that only 2 other demons have shown within the series. Now that being said, it's very short-lived, because at this time, everything that's been going down, Genya has been picking up the pieces, and he's been eating them. It's shown that Genya has become way stronger than he was before, because of the cells that he's been eating. Because it came from such a powerful demon, he's able to gain some of its powers, and because of that, he has mutated his gun to the point where flesh is covering over it, but not the same way that it was in canon, way much more, because in original canon, he only ate basically half of a tip of the katana. Now, he has been collecting everything that's been, dropping off of this guy, because of how they were just cutting him up, and basically his flesh was just scattered, right? And Genya just basically ate all of that. He himself looked essentially like a demon, and this is where he shoots Kokushibo. He tries to block it with his tendrils, which seems to work, but then it starts to grow. This is where Genya uses his demon blood hearts. These bullets start to grow into seeds, and these seeds grow into these roots that grow into a tree that basically trap Kokushibo. Now, in canon, it wasn't that much of a, hindrance, right? It made him stop, but it didn't really grow all around him. Because of the amount of demon flesh that he ate and the quality of it, this would basically become a full-grown tree, stopping him in his place, even within his monstrous form. And this is where Tanjiro takes in a deep breath and he unleashes one of his most powerful attacks, that being his fourth form of the Breath of the Eclipse, Lunar Eclipse. Now, the way that I would describe this is he takes his short sword and he puts it at a very high angle, and this is where he uses his regular length sword and he slices downwards with it against it, and this creates a spark that travels with the blade downwards. After that's complete, he then takes his short sword and does a horizontal slash going towards the neck. Now, as this is happening, his swords are basically enveloped by chaotic blades, which is the main staple of the Breath of the Moon, as you know. And as he slices through it, basically the body that he sliced through explodes with chaotic blades coming out of it. With that being said, this is where they end the fight with the Upper Moon. Now, in these last moments, he was kind of glad to see that both his style and his brother's were able to be combined to make such a powerful attack, because he knows he contributed to this great style. He's also glad that he didn't become a monster in the terms of appearance, because he doesn't really care about killing people and stuff. But in that sense, he does appreciate what Tanjiro had done for him, and that is to kill him before he became hideous. Now, because Tanjiro and Giyu as well as Genya fought off the first Upper Moon by themselves, this gives enough time for the Stone Pillar, the Mist Pillar, and the Wind Pillar to go for Muzan, because in original canon, these were the ones who actually fought off against the Upper Moon. Not only that, but both Genya and the Mist Pillar had died during that fight. This is also the reason why they were so late to fight Muzan. With no distractions in their way, they would be able to get to Muzan a lot faster than they did in canon. Therefore, this would have saved a lot of Demon Slayers from actually dying, because in original canon, over hundreds of Demon Slayers had died to Muzan because they attempted to kill him while he was recovering. This obviously didn't work, and he just used their bodies to recover faster. Because Muzan is in a fight against high tier pillars, he would quickly end Tamio's life, because at this point, Tamio has been slowly getting devoured. She isn't completely dead at this point, because in the original canon, you could see basically the top of her head still alive and talking to Muzan. I'm not sure exactly the reason for this, but I believe it was to torture her as she is getting slowly eaten. But because of this fight, he would have to quickly stop it to focus on the fight. Now, this Muzan would be weaker due to the fact that he just hasn't been able to eat the hundreds of Demon Slayers like in canon, so the pillars would have an easier time doing so. And there's also another fact that I forgot to mention, and that is because he kills Tamio right away, basically Yushiro would notice because of the connection that they share. Here, he would get incredibly angry, and therefore, he would come up with a plan. Now, this plan would take some time, as he's not as close as he would be during the original timeline, because of how the fight and everything has transpired. So during this fight between the three pillars and Muzan, he would have the help of another demon, that being Nakami. This is basically the demon that is moving around the rooms using her instrument, and she also has the one eye. So in this fight, although Muzan is weaker, he still has that advantage to him that he didn't have in original canon. So Muzan would be swinging his tendrils all over the room, and at the same time, the Demon Slayers don't have a good way to have a footing in the room, as the walls and floors are moving in and out. This is creating a disadvantage for them, as Muzan himself does not really need a solid footing due to how he can adapt his body. And in this fight, although these demon slayers are at peak performance, they would get cut up pretty badly, as Muzan is the strongest demon, no doubt. Even in this weakened form, he can still give him a challenge. And it's only 3 pillars, which are almost fodder to him. This is also around the point in where his hair changes from black to white because of the poison that Tamiyo had given him earlier. So as the fight continues, it gets harder and harder for the 3. They're only human, and Muzan doesn't really have a stamina limit. So the first one to get majorly injured would be the mist pillar, that being Murichio. His fingers would be cut off on his left arm, making it where he can only use one hand on his blade. After he wraps it back up, this is where the wind pillar would also get attacked, this time a slash to the chest. Right when it seems like the wind pillar is about to die, we have another slash, this time to the head. This is where the stone pillar, Gourmet, comes with his 3rd form, that being stone skin. Now this is a typical kind of slash attack where it basically deflects projectiles, but since he's using both his axe and his flail, it's pretty effective because those themselves have a lot of range. After doing this for a bit, he starts to focus, and this is where he activates his mark. Here he retaliates against Muzan using another form, that being the 4th form, Volcanic Rock Rapid Conquest. So the way that this form works is that he swings both sides of his weapons and basically meet each other, where the axe hits the back of the head and the flare basically hits the front. Now at this point, since he's using his mark, it also comes with another ability, that being the transparent world. Now he's able to see everything within Muzan, but this doesn't last too long, only a few seconds. He sees within Muzan that he has multiple brains and multiple hearts. Now when he tries to actually hit him, this actually ends up missing. This is because Muzan at this point is still fast enough and still agile enough to dodge his attacks. But this does still hit him though, just not in the intended place. This ends up hitting the side of his chest, so basically half his chest is gone, and it also removes his left arm. Now that being said, he quickly regenerates off of this. At this point, Muzan is kind of smirking to himself. He says to the pillars, "You 3 are impressive for humans. You're at your peak though. You will not win this fight. You will only live long enough to suffer." At this very moment, I have seen 2 pillars be vanquished by my subordinates. The pillar of love and the pillar of serpents are now dead. And you think you can survive me? Your lives would have been better if you just stayed on a normal path of life. But now you must die. Then Muzan notices something. The room is no longer moving and shifting like it was before. This is because Yushiro is actually controlling the demon. Now, how is he doing this? Well, basically, Yushiro used his talismans to basically slide through their perception. Here, he's able to just stick his fingers into her brain and control her that way. This also controls her perception, making her think that she had killed the 2 pillars. And because Muzan can look through other demons' eyes, he also thought that they had died as well. Seeing the risk factor here, he would try to kill the demon before Yushiro can really use her to his advantage, but Yushiro is fighting back. Because Yushiro isn't connected to Muzan directly, he isn't able to, well, kill him off like other demons, so he has to really fight this one. But as he's trying to concentrate on this is when the other 2 pillars join the fight, that being the love pillar and the snake pillar. Here, all 5 of them would try to kill Muzan, not giving him time to concentrate on killing the demon. With this, Yushiro has full control of the demon and forces everyone up to the surface at a distant town. Here, the plan is to keep Muzan here for an hour that is when dawn happens and the sun is out. So for this fight, I'm going to be calling them by their pillar names, as it's going to be a lot easier to do so. Once on the surface, the pillars would form a plan to try to defeat Muzan. Now they all have their specialties here, and they're all going to come into play. So on the front lines would be the Mist Pillar and the Wind Pillar. Those being the front lines, as they have a lot of kind of AoE type of attacks that would go forward, and this would be able to clear out the tentacles, or at least minimize the damage that comes from the tentacles that Muzan is using. Next after that would be the Love Pillar and also the Snake Pillar, as those two are the most flexible and therefore would be able to go around the former pillar's attacks and be able to dodge some of the tentacles that Muzan is using. After that, it'd be finished off with the Stone Pillar with the final large hit. Now, this is the plan that they're trying to execute. Now, it doesn't go directly by plan, as Muzan is no pushover. Like I said before, he basically doesn't really get affected too much by this attack. Although he's a little bit weaker than he was in canon at this time, he wouldn't really be too hurt. Now, the first two phases of the fight would work, that being the front line and then the two flexible pillars that would go around it. But then when it comes to the final big hit, it doesn't really come, as Muzan himself is not too hurt. And keep in mind that these pillars are pretty hurt at this point. For example, the Mist Pillar has lost an arm. But getting back to the fight, Muzan would dodge the final hit and then stab the Stone Pillar in the shoulder using his tentacle. This would cause him to basically be thrown into a wall and have to basically wrap it up so that it stops the bleeding. There would also be other pillars that would be a little bit injured, like the Love Pillar basically getting slashed across the chest, and this would cause a lot of bleeding as well, and this would have to be taken care of. Now, at this point, the other Demon Slayers that are here, the younger ones, the ones that are basically fodder at this point, would be out there helping the pillars by tending to their wounds when they can, because they're all grateful for what the pillars have done for them, and they're willing to risk their lives, and even some do, because Muzan will try to attack them while they're down, and this is where the other Demon Slayers would try to help and basically distract Muzan for a bit, ending with them dying in the process, and having Muzan absorb them. After a bit of back and forth between the group of pillars and Muzan, this is when finally Tanjiro and Giyu reach the others. Now at this point, the pillars have been infected with Muzan's blood, causing their cells to slowly die. But it's not as much as what Tanjiro had gotten in canon, so they're still able to fight. When Muzan sees Tanjiro for the first time in a while, he is silent. Everything around him seems so quiet, and he looks at Tanjiro with utter disgust. What he sees in front of him is a mere image of the monster he had to face over 500 years ago. He then speaks. "Who would have guessed that you would be here to confront me, a mere ghost?" Tanjiro's kind of confused by this, but he remembers what Kokushibo was talking about earlier, and apparently he may look like someone. Muzan then looks into the sky, and he laughs. He says, "Kaguya, is this what you meant by divine punishment? In all my travels, not once have I seen Buddha or God, yet this boy stands in front of me to defy my destiny." Tanjiro retorts, and he says, "Muzan, you are a mistake. You have caused so much pain and suffering that it would be my duty to end your life." And this is where he points his sword at Muzan. Muzan, being a little bit surprised, has a wide-eyed look at Tanjiro. This is where Tanjiro makes a symbol with his hand, and this is where the fight starts. Tanjiro goes to rush for Muzan, and this is where Muzan braces for the impact, trying to stab Tanjiro as he gets closer and closer. This is where the Stone Pillar launches his flail at Muzan's legs, crushing and detaching one of them. Then, this is where Tanjiro would use the 8th form of the Breath of the Moon, that being Dragon Moon Ringtail. This is basically the first form, but just scaled up a lot higher. Now obviously this would try to go for Muzan's body, but this is where Muzan would use a technique that he hasn't used for hundreds and hundreds of years. Because of the presence of the chaotic blades, this could actually kill Muzan. But what happens instead is Muzan basically breaks himself up and launches himself out. So a bunch of bits and pieces of him basically launch outwards. This is a technique that he used against the original Breath of the Sun user to escape his attacks. Now originally in canon, he was able to destroy around 1,200 of 1,500 pieces of Muzan, if I remember that right. Getting back to the fight, as Muzan would have spread out, this is where Giyu would use the 11th form, that being Dead Calm, to destroy bits and pieces that would go near him. Obviously this doesn't have infinite range, and he wouldn't be fast enough to begin with to basically destroy all of the pieces anyways. But as he's doing this, Giyu would essentially be using his mark as he's doing this, giving him more speed and reaction time. But even this is not enough. Out of the 1,500, let's say, he would only get around 400 because not everything's going towards him. But even then, he's not getting everything that is going towards him. All the bits and pieces of flesh that would go everywhere would actually hit some demon slayers and actually kill them. So Muzan is killing tens of demon slayers basically in an instant. Not only that, but it causes the blood that's in the pillars to accelerate, trying to destroy their cells faster because pieces of his flesh would get basically shot into them as if it was a bullet. So essentially everyone at this point would have Muzan's blood in him, those being the ones that are on the front line. But a few people wouldn't have it, like those that are treating others behind cover. So with that explanation out of the way, let's get back to Muzan. So he would start to slowly regenerate in a little bit of a distance away behind some cover. Here is where Genya would look around and see these pieces of flesh slightly moving. Knowing that this is Muzan's flesh, he would start eating it. He would gather a big pile of it and start eating a lot at a time. Here is where he kind of messed up. As he's eating it, Muzan can tell that his flesh is being consumed. So he starts to try to kill Genya, and obviously because of Genya's abilities and how Muzan's able to just control his cells, they're having a back and forth, and Genya's on the ground kind of in pain. And this is where Yushiro would actually come in and basically stick his hands into Genya's flesh and try to get control over the cells, the same way that he did earlier with the other demons. After Muzan is basically back to shape, he tries to go and kill Genya, knowing that his power may help in some way. But Tanjiro actually stops him. Now Tanjiro and the others are pretty messed up, but Tanjiro's still able to stand while the others can't. So he doesn't have as much of Muzan's blood as he did in canon, so he doesn't pass out like he does originally. This doesn't mean he is not, affected by this, because he is. Now, as Muzan sees that he's slower, he tries to kill Tanjiro, which he actually ends up hitting him. But something is wrong here, because Muzan doesn't hit the place that he intended to hit. Instead, he only grazed Tanjiro's arm. He knows something is off, and he realized that it is because of Tamio. Now, like I said in the beginning, he absorbed Tamio, and because of that, she had the poison with her. Basically, the one that turns demons into humans, but there was also one other thing, an aging potion. Essentially, as time goes on, he gets older and older. That's why he had white hair. He finds this out going through the subconscious of Tamio. Since he absorbed her, he gets kind of their memories if he searches for it. So to put this all in perspective, the potion goes by this rate. It goes 50 years per minute. So every minute you age 50 years. So at this point, he has had the potion for around 3 hours, I believe it said in canon. So he says that he is around 9,000 years old, or at least age 9,000 years old. So that's from the manga. I don't know if those are correct numbers, so don't at me on that. So anyways, let's get back into the story. As Tanjiro is close to Muzan, he takes out his second sword and performs a Breath of the Eclipse style. He does Breath of the Eclipse, Lunar Eclipse. So like I said before, the longer sword basically scrapes against the top sword as it goes down, creating a spark that follows and cuts the demon while also burning it a bit. Then the shorter sword does a cut across towards the neck. So right as he's about to cut the neck, this is where Muzan releases a concussive blast. Now, because there is his cells within each of the pillars, including Tanjiro, this basically makes him have seizures. So Tanjiro is on the ground and he can't move his body. He's having a seizure. As Tanjiro is lying on the ground, this is where Muzan tries to end his life again. But the snake pillar comes and saves Tanjiro. He picks him up and takes him away while the other pillars go and attack Muzan. They're severely weakened due to the blood that's in their system, but a cat is actually sent out to give them the cure to Muzan's cells. So this is the cat that Tamio uses to transport each of her kind of blood vials that Tanjiro gets for her, or at least used to. Well, anyways, the cat is able to disperse the cure to each of the pillars, but in this instance, it's basically killed by Muzan. It came out of left field and everyone there is confused, but since it is in their favor, they just roll with it. With the cure in their bodies, they're able to fight at a higher percentage now. That being said, it's still a rough fight for all of them. In the meanwhile, Tanjiro is having a memory, but it isn't his memory. It is a memory of an ancestor. And in this memory, he sees the original Breath of the Sun user, that being Yoriichi, I believe that's how it's pronounced. In this memory, the two are sharing a conversation. They are talking about life in general, as well as the breath style, Breath of the Sun. Now, here we learn that Tanjiro's ancestor actually did learn it. We also learn about Yoriichi and how he was actually kicked out of the Demon Slayers because of stuff that happened with his brother. Now, if you guys didn't know, Yoriichi is not the first Demon Slayer. He didn't create the organization. Just keep that in mind. Now, let's get back to what I was talking about earlier. So he was kicked out of the Demon Slayers because his brother had become a demon. Therefore, he was kicked out. This obviously made him super depressed because he sees life as something special and he's always loved his brother. To see him as a demon, that made him cry. Later in the conversation, they talk about the mysterious 13th form of the Breath of the Sun, and Tanjiro's ancestor talks about how Yoriichi hasn't taught him how to do it yet. And keep in mind that Tanjiro's ancestor has a photographic memory from what I remember, and that's how he's able to learn Breath of the Sun, which was passed down through his bloodline. Cutting back to the real world and what's happening, the pillars are pretty much taken out. They are on the ground, almost unable to fight, with only a few standing, this being Giyu and the wind pillar Sanemi. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But anyways, like when I say they're down, I don't mean, just knocked out. I'm talking about like limbs being detached, and some are even dead. I would say that the love pillar has died at this point, or close to death, and the mist pillar would have died, with only the rest still holding on to a bit of life. After a while, this is where Tanjiro would awaken once again and come to help out the other two pillars. Now, he has a grotesque amalgamation of flesh on his face due to how Muzan's blood is basically mutating his body, but he continues going forward. With both of his swords becoming bright red, he leaps into the fight, trying to protect the two pillars. Here he uses a Breath of the Sun technique. Here he uses Burning Bones, Summer Sun. Basically, what this is that he creates a circular slash as he jumps forward to defend any attacks. As he does so, he would go closer to Muzan, as he would basically cut off the tentacles. Then he would use Setting Sun Transformation. Now this is a technique where the person backflips into the air and delivers a powerful upending sword slash. Now because of how slow Muzan has become, he doesn't see himself winning this fight, so he tries to divide himself again in the hopes of leaving, because before he was just here to kill the demon slayers, but now he fears his life. But as he tries to divide, something's not working. He can't. That's because another part of the poison that Tamio had brought also stops cell division, so he cannot divide himself like he did before. Now the reason why he's able to do it before is because the poison seems to work at different times, as some of the poisons worked beforehand and some later. So at the time and where he did divide, it didn't take full effect. As the fight prolongs itself, Tanjiro finds out the secret of the 13th form, that being constantly and continuously do all the forms one after the other. This in turn should be able to kill Muzan, so he gets to it, trying to do each and every form of the Breath of the Sun. But as he's getting to the last few ones, this is where Muzan activates another concussive blast. And this again causes Tanjiro to have a seizure, but it's not as bad as he was before. He's able to stay conscious and resist it a little bit. As this is happening, this is when the other pillars get in the way of Muzan. This is where the stone pillar uses his chains tie around Muzan, restricting his movement. Then the other pillars would go and try to fight him as well. Muzan's body transforms even more. He has serrated mouths all over his body, and he seems more fierce than he was before. He's on his last legs at this point. Fighting them off is nothing to him really, but he's really worried about Tanjiro. He can't get close to him because of the pillars restricting his movements. When Tanjiro is back up, this is where he tries to do another form, one of his most powerful forms. Because he can't really do all the Breath of the Sun techniques without being interrupted, he needs to use this form, this being the final form of the Breath of the Eclipse, that being Solar Eclipse. He raises both of his swords into the air and starts slowly rotating them. As he does so, it gets faster and faster, to the point that something appears behind Tanjiro. It's a wheel, and because of the flames and the light that's appearing behind Tanjiro, it seems golden. And this wheel is the Dharma wheel. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Basically, it's a symbol in Buddhist religion that shows the 8 noble paths, I believe it's called. Now I'll be reading them off to let you understand which each of them are. Going clockwise, we have the right view, to know the truth. The right intention, free your mind of evil. Right speech, say nothing that hurts others. Right action, work for the good of others. Right livelihood, respect life. Right effort, resist evil. Right concentration, practice meditation. And the last one, right mindfulness, control your thoughts. And this pretty much summarized Tanjiro's development over the series, for the most part. As he's about to perform the attack, he tells everyone to close their eyes, as this will blind them. They all do so except for Muzan and the stone pillar, because he's blind, and with Muzan, demons don't blink. As Tanjiro begins to spin his weapons faster and faster, they kind of collide a little bit. This creates a spark from before, this time becoming brighter and brighter each time he does so. And as he goes towards Muzan, he goes forward almost like a drill. When the blades finally touch Muzan, it's almost too fast for Muzan to react. The light had blinded him for a second, and he needed time for his eyes to regenerate. And keep in mind that Tanjiro is using the equipment that he got before, those being the glasses that he got from the swordsmith village. But as the blades are inside of Muzan, a light appears throughout his body, burning it from the inside. Because Muzan has multiple organs, this 8-path wheel only destroys 8 of them. It destroys all 5 of his brains and 3 of his hearts, in total being 8. With most of his chest being gone, this is where the sun is about to rise and it's going to be dawn. Tanjiro then sighs out of relief, saying that they've won, but then he sees that the body is trying to escape. Because Tanjiro was not able to kill all of its organs, Muzan is still alive, but just barely. Here he takes the advantage and tries to pin Muzan down so he can't escape, which he does so. He thrusts using a Breath of the Sun technique, that being Sunflower Thrust. It's basically a very powerful thrust. There isn't much to it. So Muzan at this point, he can see the sun rising and it starts to burn him. So he tries to kill Tanjiro at this spot point blank using a concussive blast. But before he could fully use it, this is where Tanjiro uses his other sword, his short sword, and cuts off the jaw of Muzan, not letting him use his ability because it comes out of his mouth. Then Muzan uses his other mouths that are around his body to try to use it as well, which he successfully does. This blows off the arm of Tanjiro. Feeling the pain, Tanjiro pushes through it. Because this Tanjiro is way stronger than it was in canon, he pushes through the pain and sticks to pinning down Muzan. Seeing that he has no way of getting out, Muzan creates a cocoon-like structure around him and Tanjiro. Here he fills Tanjiro up with his blood. Now, in canon, Tanjiro was basically dead. His heart had stopped and he was just used as a tool. But in this, Tanjiro is still alive. So, this is where Muzan, remembering what Kaguya had told him about how feelings will outlive people, and those are the ones that actually live forever, decides to take his advice and put all of his feeling into Tanjiro to let Tanjiro achieve his dream. A few moments later, the cocoon would burn, and what would be revealed would be Tanjiro all by himself, with his arm regained. Now, I'm gonna have 2 different endings for this series, a good ending and also a bad ending, because I feel like the ending for Demon Slayer could have been a lot darker, and we really missed that opportunity. But it is a shonen, and there's always gonna be a happy ending at the very end, so it makes sense. But yeah, so I'll tell you the good ending and then the bad ending afterwards. So Tanjiro emerges from the cocoon pretty much better than he was before. Since he was still alive, he's still conscious and doesn't let Muzan take over. Here he's able to understand what's happening and doesn't really want to be a demon. He gets burned slightly by the sun, but then it turns out that he has conquered the sun. Because Tanjiro had a very, very high sense of smell as a human, it's even more enhanced as a demon. And because he's a new demon, it's hard for him to control his lust for blood. But he tries to as he can, because remember, this Tanjiro is more disciplined than he was in canon. But it's still pretty hard for him. In his mind, he could see Muzan telling him what to do. He could see his family trying to stop Muzan from controlling him. And it's just a back and forth battle. Tanjiro doesn't have too much time until he fully submits to his instinct. But this is when his sister comes in, Nezuko, as a human this time. The medicine that she had gotten had finally worked, and she's now fully human. Here she comforts her brother, and he slowly gains his humanity back. Not actually though, he's still a demon at this point. But this is where Karano comes in with the cure that the cat was using earlier to cure the other pillars. Here, she's able to cure Tanjiro of his demon transformation and turn him back into a human. Then Tanjiro essentially collapses, and we could skip a few days as he wakes up in the hospital with a non-functional right arm. I believe it was the right arm, but it doesn't really matter. He would also be blind in one eye because of where the blood would affect him. And after this, it's pretty much how Demon Slayer would end in the manga. Tanjiro would live the rest of his life, happy that he was able to stop the menace to humanity, that being Muzan. He would then marry Kanao and then have kids, and his bloodline would continue. That's basically how Demon Slayer ends. The characters that you think are going to be together get together, and essentially most of the pillars die. That's how it ends, and that's the good ending. Now let's get into the bad ending. Now this one is going to be a bit darker, as you could guess. So we would start off with Muzan basically injecting himself into Tanjiro, but a slight difference here. Because Tanjiro is alive, he's able to basically control him better. Is what I mean by that is he's able to use all of his techniques and everything he's learned. Because in original canon, he was basically like an animal, only running on instinct. But because he has a human mind intact, this is where things get a lot harder for everyone. Because he's learned all of his breath styles and essentially is the strongest character within Demon Slayer at this point, he basically massacres everyone. Like literally none of them have a chance. They would try to attack him, but it wouldn't work. He would be already more skilled than them, he would not be fatigued at all, would not be injured at all, and would be fighting at 100%. And he wouldn't be affected by the sun. In this scenario, let's say that Muzan has 100% control of him right now. Even his sister pleading with him, his friends pleading with him, crying even, it wouldn't change the fact that Muzan is in control. They too would be slaughtered. And with all the Demon Slayers basically dead, this is where Muzan's blood would start to dilute, and Muzan would then pass on to hell. This is where Tanjiro gains back his consciousness. Seeing everything that he's killed, he tries to kill himself, but he can't because he's become the perfect being. He can't turn himself back into a human. And if you're wondering about the serum, given that Muzan had 100% control over him, he would have destroyed it. Here Tanjiro would weep in this destroyed field. Everyone that he's cared about is essentially dead. From main characters like the Pillars to side characters like Murata and Yushiro. They would have died trying to stand up to Tanjiro, and Tanjiro is there alone. Those who survived though would be Kaguya's kids, Uzi Tengen, that being the Sound Pillar, and Kojiro, that being the Flame Pillar. Here, this is where Tengen and Rengoku, as well as his father, the former Pillar of the Flames, would have to try to kill Tanjiro for the greater good. Even without fighting back, they wouldn't be able to kill him. With this, he would have to be under the watch of the Kaguya family and be looked after until they find a cure or a way to execute Tanjiro. They would have to look through Tamio's old basically notes, but it's most likely that she wouldn't kept many or be very scarce, as she wouldn't want anyone to discover what she was doing, especially demons. So they would have to try to reverse engineer it. But keep in mind that there isn't really someone as skilled as either Shinobu, Tamio, or anyone like that really, that's still alive, that they know of. So Tanjiro would have to live the rest of his life trying to repent and try to turn himself back into a human. Now, how long would this take? Well, I don't think it would take as long as you would think. I think Tanjiro himself would be the one leading the charge, trying to find the cure and looking at the old notes of what Tamio had left, if any. And given that he can be the supply of the demon blood, it wouldn't take too long to develop a cure. I would say probably around 10 years. I know that seems like a lot, but Tanjiro is relatively young at this point, being 17 at the time of killing Muzan. So by the time he does develop the cure, he would be 27. And then once injected by the cure, he would most likely die on the spot. This is because when Tanjiro was able to regenerate his arm due to the effects of the demon blood, it basically became non-functional after he became human. And because Tanjiro unlocked his mark, everyone who's ever unlocked their mark has died at the age of 25. Except for one person and one other person who unlocked it later on after they were 25. So Tanjiro would die on the spot, and as he passes away, he would see his friends and family for one last time. He would be forgiven for what he had done although it wasn't his fault and it wasn't really his actions because he was under the control of Muzan. So it's not like he would go to hell or anything. In fact, I believe his friends and family would forgive him. I mean, there isn't much he could have done in that situation. But yeah, because of his hardships that he had to go through, and Tanjiro becoming more religious, I think, in this because of how he wanted to repent, he would most likely be reincarnated to have a happier life, just like other characters from Demon Slayer did. But yeah, so this is going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys like it. This was a very long video to make, and also the first series that I ever completed. So for those saying that Comic Sans doesn't complete series, well, here you go. But in all reality, this series was really fun to make. I really enjoyed it. I tried my best for this series. I did a lot of editing for this series, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys want to see more Demon Slayer videos in the future, and tell me what you think about the two endings. I know they're very, very different, but I wanted to do that as Demon Slayer itself could have gone really bad in terms of how dark the ending could have been, but it's just my spin on things, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's been one hell of a ride. It's been over a year since I started this series, and it's finally over. I genuinely hoped you guys liked the video. And with that being said, we gotta give a shout out to the patrons over on Patreon. So if you wanna join them, it only costs $1, you get my videos early, and you have a chance of getting a art request from me. So with that being said, let's actually thank them. So in our gold tier, we have Nippy Director, Kenny, and Dwayne Finn. In our platinum tier, we have Lyko. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said before, if you made it to the end, and this is important, please comment down CS so I know you support the channel. And one more thing, comment down ending 1 for the good ending or ending 2 for the bad ending, depending on which one you like more. So with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, like I keep saying. So yeah.